Hey y'all, welcome to Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom sitting down having real conversations with real Texas parents about what's going on in our schools. Today, I'm joined by Becca Williams, the co-founder of Valor Education, mom of two, author, and just all around great woman. Becca, thanks for being here with us today.
Really excited to be with you.
So, as a mom now, but as a founder of an incredible public charter school that has really swept the Austin area of Texas and is growing with a massive waiting list, can you tell us about what was that started your desire and where was the need that you saw to really start a classical public charter school?
Great question. The first thing I would say is I'm not classically educated. I went through a K-12 public school system, which by all means was considered very good. It was a blue ribbon school, and I'm not as angry as I should be for the education that I was given. And I say that kind of joking. The girls' golf team was amazing, but outside of that, I look back at kind of the transformation in thought after being exposed to classical education in college, and I say, what an incredible waste of time that was in some of the most fit years of my life, where they had all these hours and time to form, and I got bits and pieces of it, but on the whole, it's really a letdown when I look back, because I was not an on-fire student until I encountered the fullness of education, the breadth and depth of questions that people can ask in education, and I was very interested. And I look back on that education with mostly fondness, but like I said, I'm not as angry as I should be.
Well, that's interesting because I feel the same way. So public educated, not classically educated. But I want to talk about what that means. And when I look back and now the passion for, I sought out a classical education for my kids because it does just really, it creates that wonder that, and inspires a love for education. And so for me, when I was looking at it, I really wanted that importance of the grammar school that's typically elementary school, the logic, which is typically the middle school ages, and then obviously the rhetoric, which is ensuring that children grow and learn how to advocate for themselves and participate in democracy. So I love that. Same. That's where I am. So talk to us a little bit about what a classical education is and what you really sought to do with the founding of Valor.
Yeah, you just gave a really good overview of when you look for classical education, you'll find that it's these stages, and that's really part of the method that's been tested time and again. Some of the highlights that I would say are, we don't discount memorization in the grammar stage. We need these things to build thoughts later on, and this is the process of how someone comes to genuine wisdom. So one of the other things I would say, we could look at it from the perspective of method, or we could look at it from the perspective of content, which is kind of the juicier part too. So when we look at classical education, I would say it's become a buzzword, and parents are seeking it out because there's a lot of malaise, and we're looking, where do we go? And this is now with buzzwords and movements, it becomes a brand. And I would say right now the state of classical education, it's something analogous to Montessori, which in the sense of we have a philosophy and idea with a certain level of purity, and then we have many different manifestations of it with different levels of adherence to that original philosophy. And it's a brand, people are attracted to it. So that being said, what I would say what absolutely should be there with classical education is, first, in terms of content, there's a priority given to truth, beauty, and goodness as the transcendental properties of being, for which things would not be otherwise. And that is opposed to a materialist philosophy that sees kind of the world coming from the bottom up. Mm-hmm. And matter is the most fundamental thing in being. And it's a different way of approaching the world and questions. It has unbelievable consequences for what comes out of that. The biggest one of which I would say is that it sets people on fire to go explore the world and to know. And that's where the wonder comes from, because if goodness, truth, and beauty is what's foundational, if it's given priority, everything is intelligible, it's shot through with meaning, and as a human being that's rational and capable of knowing and being known, you are sent out into the world to know and to to see things. And I think that's the it might be, it's a lot of jargon there to throw after somebody, but you cannot overstate how much of a different way of approaching reality that is. So that's kind of the undergirding philosophy. And then I would say there's an attention to virtue ethics, and then there's a respect for the Western canon and the classics and the train of thought that we've inherited over thousands of years from the Greeks and the Romans, their wisdom and how to think about the world. And that in a nutshell, I would say, is the juiciest part of the content, and those things should be there. And that Valor is participating in the classical tradition, but also has his own spin on many things, and little pockets here and there that we are saying, this is the direction we're taking. So it's not a purist, rigorous form of classical education, whatever that may be, but I would say that absolutely has to be there in order for it to be really a classical education.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. So can you give an example for parents? Let's start with K through 12, or what would be typically the grammar school portion of a classical education. So what is the difference between the classical model, that is what Valor is doing, and the traditional kind of public school where we are right now? Where is an example of a difference? So public school does this versus classical model does that.
I will give one example, and I think it's helpful to think. I mentioned we memorize things. So we will memorize poetry. We will memorize great works of Shakespeare and sonnets and all kinds of stuff like that. And we don't consider that a waste of anyone's time. And kids will go on in their lives, and they will have these things in the back of their minds to recall and form to, and it will continue to illuminate them, and they will go deeper into the poems throughout their entire life. We don't poo-poo memorization. And we're not, back to that materialist philosophy, we're not saying everything is bits of information to be repackaged. We're saying the way to understand the world is from the top down, things as they are in the whole. And, one of the way we do that is we access it through poetry. And so the memorization of poems is one example where we would say, excellent idea.
I think that is great. And I actually want to share with you, this is just total coincidence, but my 7-year-old is in a camp, and this is a Friday that we're talking, and they're doing a talent show. And the first thing she said, she's very organized. That's her thing. And the first thing when she had to come up with what she was going to do, she said, I just need them to wheel in a bookcase that's disorganized and I'll organize it. And I was like, no, we're not. This is not, your OCD is not what people want to see. And then she said, I'll say poems. And so today, this afternoon at her camp, so shout out to Miss K at Valor, she is going to be reciting poems that in first grade she learned and has stuck with her. So that's just a little personal anecdote that I think is really wonderful and absolutely has stimulated her love of reading and poetry.
Excellent choice. I see the Agnes Magnus Award in a Drogin future.
Well, we'll see. Like I said, that OCD it controls a lot of it. But anyways, that's a great example. Thank you. So let's talk to the parents that are thinking about their middle school years, or what, again, would kind of be the logic phase of a classical education. What's a bit of the difference? What is something that for a classical model would be doing in those years?
I would say we're looking at parts of different things in a different way. We're maybe not to the step of synthesizing yet, although I would say there's sometimes more overlap in these things than you would like to think. There are people that get to the why questions, which I would say is associated with the logic phase. From having young kids, there are kids who are already asking the why questions. So I don't know about major differences in terms of compartmentalizing stages. What I will say is that we are not telling them one way or another. We're giving them the range of the questions, the whys and the hows, as opposed to what could be prepackaged answers.
Right. The dictation of here's the information that you need, as opposed to really facilitating, again, that love of learning and that seeking of wisdom and knowledge.
Yes, we're preparing them for an ownership of their thoughts and their beliefs, because they're not just repeating them. Hopefully they are taking them into themselves and either adopting them or formulating their own thoughts and questions about them. So it's a real respect for the person, for their intellect, for their integrity, and for their free will.
That's great. So then let's move into the what would traditionally be kind of the high school years, if you will, or the rhetoric phase of a classical education.
Rhetoric is not in this under some sort of political persuasion technique. It's really the ability to communicate to others. And I think we do Socratic kind of teaching methods, and then the biggest thing is the seminar, where students are prompted and led by a teacher, but actually they're doing most of the class and the teaching. And if the seminar is done well, and if the kids are approaching a text with humility and respecting each other and their thoughts, the teacher does very little actually in involvement. The teacher proposes a question to help kids, but a seminar is a style of discussing a text where there's respect given to everyone, and you're looking at the text and discussing it together to explore, not to say you have an answer on everything, but really to work together to explore. So I would say that's the kind of emphasis on communication, and the seminar style is very different than classroom styles of a lecture and dictation. So that's what I would say. One example.
Yeah, I think it's great to really explain how kind of the method and the process through the K through 12 years works, so that parents do have an understanding of what classical means, similar to how you were talking about Montessori, how that became a real big thing, particularly for the pre-K years. But with that, I was reading a book the other day, and it was a Brit that was talking about how the classical model, and specifically rhetoric, that hundreds of years ago, that rhetoric was taught to the general population, from nobles all the way down to average citizens, because that was the only way that you could have a citizenry that could participate. Whereas math and other things, people would have to pay for those courses. And he pointed out that, again, in England, the past 50 I think it was, or leaders, from parliament to nobility or the monarchy to the to church leaders, were all given a classical model, because that is how people engage in having respectful civil discussions and participating in society. And I think that is something that is incredibly important, especially in this day and age where there's so much division. I hear, unfortunately, far too often about things that are going on in our public school system that creates and facilitates this very divisive idea, the oppressed versus the oppressor, victim versus victimized, and things like that. And really ensuring that children learn how to think and articulate their views in a respectful manner would do wonders for America and Texas. And so thank you for explaining to guests what kind of that looks like. Something else that's really important about the school that you founded is not just the model of the education, but the culture. Here in the Austin area, I think, it's interesting, because when we see the kids outside of the school, you can always spot a Valor child, whether they're in their uniform or things like that. But there is a cultural element that, equally to the rigorous education, it's also, you all have done a phenomenal job of creating a culture where you have kept kind of pop culture, even the culture wars, out of the school, recognizing different backgrounds, because it is a public charter school where it's just a straight up lottery. Anybody and everybody can and does attend. And in that culture, you all keep smartphones out of the classrooms, which this is a huge issue in Texas schools. It's a huge issue nationally. We just saw Georgia pass a law to say no smartphones in classrooms. But can you talk a little bit? I read your paper in the Federalist, where you talked about smartphone zombies, and talk about what you've seen, why it's so important, and what parents can do to fight back against the really, really pernicious, dangerous effects of not only the smartphone addiction, but having them in the classrooms where kids can't engage with teachers and their peers.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much for mentioning the school culture at Valor. We're really, really proud of that. And I do think so there's a lot of people who are very smart on classical ed in terms of thought and theory and stuff like that. But the ability to combine that with the practical wisdom of running a school and training the teachers and the headmasters as to how to hold the school and hold the school culture that can facilitate that learning, those are two very different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what makes Valor exceptional is that we do have the school culture that has we have an order, and kids are invited to participate in that order, and they know where the boundaries are, and they're actually way more comfortable. It allows them to learn because they bump up that, okay, I don't do that, and we don't tolerate bullying. We don't, and we're very attuned to making sure we resolve those issues before they ever become a thing. And in that vein, the smartphone, and this isn't, this has been done for years. This has been done as long as I participated in the where I taught as well. Is that the phones are put away, and that was done for a number of reasons. But we know now all these kinds of harmful issues with attention span and distractibility, leading to all kinds of psychological issues with isolation, with sociability issues, and depression and anxiety. These are just the manifold expressions of a device that's really captures your attention, but it falls short of the total human experience, which is an embodied experience. And so that's kind of the way that classical education from the beginning, a lot of schools approach the phone issue, and now we're looking at it from a whole host of different questions. Now we have data that verifies what we intuited for a very long time, and I think that's really helpful. And I think it's an issue that must poll really well, because Gavin Newsom, who has the ability to poll everything, and the also decided, I'm going to take up this issue as well, because this is upsetting to parents, and it's getting in the way of teaching and instruction, and we can see where this is going, and it's really bad. And so we're gonna have to come up with a solution for this.
Yeah. So the solution for Valor is what? That other schools and school leaders could replicate. Let's say what they can do so that parents can go advocate for their kids. So what can a school leader, public school, your public school, go do right now to implement a policy, and how is it enforced?
Phones are turned off and locked in lockers. And I think the two biggest domains of pushback that parents will initially give is, one is safety,
Mm-hmm.
which is a legitimate, healthy concern of a parent for safety. And the second is kind of a philosophy of micro-parenting, which actually, goes against certain other types of, it's not a libertarian idea to tell, from the top down that we're going to take the phones away. So you have two kind of streams of pushback. And I would say, but on the whole, most people are really happy. And once it's done, it's really actually not a problem. It's not even a thing.
Right.
Once you take care of it.
Yeah. It just, once you go through that initial pain for some people that maybe aren't used to it.
Yes.
That's right. So thank you for going over that. So something that you touched on was bullying, which is a horrific problem that is really plaguing far too many of our schools. In fact, I just spoke to a mother whose email I used as testimony, where she talked about her son attempting suicide. And I can't tell you how many parents have talked to me about whether it's that far in the extreme, or self-harm, or just problems. You did an article, was it for the Daily Wire, if I remember, on bullies?
I think that one got in Town Hall. There might, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But can you talk to us kind of about what we're seeing and why, and what policies you all have implemented to really stomp that out before it becomes an issue? Because kids can be mean at all ages, right? And so there obviously has to be policies that the teachers and administrators back up to make it happen. So what have you seen, and what do you all do?
I think from the 40,000-foot view, there's been an adoption of a lot of policies under the name of restorative justice,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a very misleading term, because fundamentally justice is restorative. It is the restoration of an imbalance. It's giving someone their due. But these policies often advocate for, every experience, every consequence you would give is traumatic. and trauma is the alpha and the omega, and so it reverses the ability to actually restore the imbalance. And it doesn't do justice to the victims. It's kind of that inversion that you mentioned, and this way of looking at school culture and all this provides a foundation for bullies to rule.
Mhm.
And
Can I stop you for a second? So
yes.
for parents and for teachers and administrators to understand, when we talk about restorative justice, there were policies pushed, I believe it was the Obama administration, that really handicapped the ability for teachers and administrators to enforce policies and actually discipline problem children, whether it was violent children, just disruptive children, bullying children. It really did kind of say you can't punish kids that are huge problems in our classrooms. And in their, the theory behind it was, like you said, that it would create even more trauma on the child that was violent or disruptive or whatever. But what it did was it just basically told them you can do whatever you want. And over a decade later, we really see the results of not having discipline in our classrooms. And that's where we see teachers that are incredibly frustrated. I know so many of the public school teachers that I speak to, everybody wants to talk about teacher pay, and we're all about let's increase teacher pay. But teachers who love kids and love teaching, this is what they talk about. They talk about they cannot enforce rules. They're told they cannot discipline problem children or remove them and put them in a different environment that's suited to deal with whatever the issue is. But I wanted to make sure that our guests watching or listening, teachers, parents, and whatnot, really understand where this came from and what it has done to really handicap our system to enforce disciplinary measures. But go ahead.
I think everything you just said, towards the end there is exactly where I would have gone with this, which is that in the public district schools, which are very happy with their teacher pay, all this stuff that their benefits, all that stuff that they've been able to provide for their teachers, they are very upset with the classroom. And it's the number one thing that I think would be a wedge issue to be like, hey, this is a problem here. Your classroom is out of control. And kids can't learn anything if the classroom is out of control. And so the thing is that you have to have a consistent culture from one classroom to the next, so everyone has to participate in it, and it does have to go a certain way in order for all of this to work. And we've seen the practical consequences of a bad set of ideas that ran into the rough edges of reality, and this doesn't work in terms of ordering a school. And I think, one other thing, I'm not 100% knowledgeable about the lineage of thought of restorative justice. But one of the other things that was a part of this was trying to reduce the number of suspensions and expulsions for certain demographic populations, and kind of a frustration with an inability to do that, and like a change in policies to try to fix something that was ultimately did the opposite of helping the very people they wanted to help. And so this is kind of where we're at. So I'd start by saying that, and that I do think that this is a great thing to bring up, and I do think it could improve education in incredible ways. If you're just an average teacher, if your classroom is paying attention, you can actually do something. You don't have to be the greatest orator or Socratic teaching method. If you have a classroom of students that is participating because they believe in the order and they're listening and you have their attention, wondrous things can happen.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about, like I said, Valor is a public school. It's operated under a lottery. I know that there is a huge wait list because it has built a reputation that is unmatched here in the Austin area for sure. In fact, I remember getting on the lottery and going, we won, like, screaming to my husband. And so when we talk about that, these are wonderful children, scholars from every demographic, every race, every socioeconomic class, every political ideology, and you're bringing children together, some who have had formal pre-K, some who have not, many who are transferring in from a traditional public school. So expectations that you all have implemented for kids and the support that you're providing teachers, talk a little bit how you do this, because oftentimes I'll hear traditional public schools say, well, we can't do that because, or whatnot, but this isn't true. So can you give some real world processes or applications that has really ensured that Valor maintains that culture, recognizing that it's a very diverse group of scholars that are in attendance, diverse group of parents that are participating, and teachers who, quite frankly, are usually sacrificed to be at a public charter school, and how you support them.
I do want to give the disclaimer that I am not a spokesperson. I'm not an employer of Valor. I was the first domino and there at the beginning. I cannot take credit for the success that has come out of what I was there at the beginning. So I just want to get that out. And at the same time, I would say Valor would say something like, we are truly open to all. We mean that. And it's not that hard to affirm the dignity of each human person, and to be an open door, and to have a, we use the word culture. People are using it in so many different contexts. But I would just say that, no, we have a policy that affirms the goodness of each person, and we truly believe in each one of them, that they are capable of knowing, and that they desire to know. And we're offering, it's really an invitation to classical education. It's not a force. So if you're invited, if you would like to come, you can and participate in this. And it's that simple.
Mm-hmm. So when there are problems, how are they handled? How is it handled when there is a problem? You mentioned when we started out, when talking about kind of the bullying issue, that is pretty typical in development for children, to kind of push some boundaries and test some things. So how is it, it's not tolerated? What are some methods that maybe could be helpful for some teachers or administrators that might be watching that have been successful in really trying to curtail this epidemic that's unfortunately plaguing a lot of our schools?
I'm not sure where to go with this one. Can you give me like a specific example of what you're looking for?
So let's say, we talk about this, particularly in the middle school years, Mean Girls, right?
Oh, yeah.
We all experience kind of that, it's a awkward time, and goodness gracious, right now it is really a difficult time, because if you do allow your young girls to have access to social media, I can remember watching Dawson's Creek and looking at like 20-year-olds that were playing teenagers and being like, I don't look like that. But now, social media, you're just inundated with what 14 or 15 or 16-year-old girls look like. And so there's this awkward phase of life that you're going through, and then some girls develop faster or whatever. So you get the mean girls, right? And that's kind of happens. So what is something that can be done to stamp out bullying amongst young girls? What is something that can be done that can really try and focus the scholars' time and energy on positive objectives and wonder in the education system and things like that?
Well, one small thing I would say is school uniforms do help. I think there's a lot of people have given a lot of thought to this. I think school uniforms help with that a little bit. I also think teachers are models of all of these virtues that we're trying to promote among the students. And you can't give someone what you don't have. And so our teachers participate in constant renewal of the virtue tradition and growing in virtue and wisdom. And they model it to the students. And I would also say that I think the tone of what we do is a lot of the time set by humility. And that's one virtue that's totally forgotten for the most part. It's like, it's a useless virtue for someone trying to pursue power, wealth, and stuff like that would step on everyone on their way. It's a total humility, but that is one of the core things that we stress at Valor. And I think that works wonders. And as far as practical things, my son was in a program, and I wouldn't say he was bullied. I would say that the idea was that not everyone has to be friends, which I could see how that would be a thought. But what that thought eventually led to is that they were allowed to say no and separate in groups and break up. And I don't think that that's how we facilitate. We would give a slightly different answer to that, to not isolate individuals, to not create the sense of loneliness. And I think, when I was a teacher in the fourth grade classroom, I found that we had created a culture where everyone was rooting for the kids that were struggling. And there was like, your most difficult students ended up being, we'd have an award at the end of the week, and everyone delighted when, a kid who was struggling with behavioral issues and stuff did something great, and was recognized for doing that. And I think you can create a culture of this.
What was the award called? What'd you do?
Well, I gave them chocolate, which in hindsight, maybe the parents didn't appreciate. But I just remember I would have kids coming up to me to try to, it's hard to have a reward at the end because kids will try to tailor things to their reward. But we had instances where it would become clear that the award was for genuine acts of, nobility, courage, and justice. And, I'm trying to recall specific examples, but, the kids would come to me and say, did you know so-and-so did this? He didn't. And, they were trying to participate in, did you see this act of justice? Did you see this act of goodness? And so I remember that those were some of everyone's favorite moments. And you can begin to let that develop among the students. And as a teacher, you only have one set of eyes. There's 30 kids. They will take in and see so much more than you do, and their brains are like little sponges. So you can't see everything, but you can set the order and continue to model it.
That's awesome. So you really have been an innovator in the education space, from your desire to work with an amazing team to found Valor. But based on all of the great writing that I see you do, from Fox News to Town Hall, Federalist, things like that, you have your pulse on your finger on the pulse of where things in education are moving. So where do you see education going, particularly as it relates to the parent empowerment movement? We talked about parent empowerment is about truly empowering every single parent to make the best choice for their child, whether it's a public charter school, which is what I chose, or a private school or homeschool or whatnot. Where do you see education in the parent empowerment movement and how parents are getting involved going here in the future? What are you going to be writing about in the future?
Well, I think we have the policy. I think that you've done a really good job promoting the policy, and I think other places are adopting it. And I think we don't know where it goes because it's kind of analogous to the invisible hand. Adam Smith's people work in their own interests and things happen the way they should. And so there's kind of an unknown quantity to it. But in this case, the very visible hand is the parent's hand. Yeah. And choosing what school is best for them. I have no idea what this does to Valor. Actually, people think it'll do one thing or another, but at the end of the day, each family has to make a choice for their unique child, and where that goes, and turning that over to them allows them. We have a lot of homeschooling families at Valor. They may choose to say, you know what? Given the choice now, this looks a little different. This is how I would do it differently. You might get clusters of micro schools. You might get all kinds of, you're going to have a garden variety kind of, and it will be organic. And I think, I think we're doing a good enough job at Valor that most of the families who are here will continue to opt in, because that's actually where they choose to send their kids, regardless of if they have, any option. And I think, we have the policy. I think it's a matter of different bodies and areas adopting this policy, and then those places that have pointing and so look at these results. Yep. And look at it. It's going to take a very long time. And I think that's the general flow and movement of education from the policy level. And I hope it continues to flower. I think it's a really tough fight because there are all kinds of entrenched political machines that do not want to see this come about. Which
you guys have come up against, and the charter school movement and the association have really had to come up against those as well. And it's something that you're acutely aware of, is those entities part of the system, part of the political machine, that say we don't want there to be the options for parents. But thankfully, parents and leaders like yourself and those within the other charter schools that have opened and provided incredible educations that are, a little bit different, but the choice of parents throughout our great state. So I'm excited to see the growth in charter schools. I'm very excited to see the growth of classical charter schools. We released a paper here at TBPF last year that highlighted that while charter schools have been growing and had doubled over the past roughly decade here in Texas, classical models have grown sevenfold because there really is this demand to get away from that dictation that's gone on and become a part of the education system that's really taken the wonder and excitement out of schools and opened that up and given that back to kids with that classical model. So grateful, obviously, I say this all the time, how grateful I am really for great leaders like yourself and particularly within the charter school movement and the public schools that are trying to do something different and trying to really recognize the desire of parents to just make sure their child gets a great education regardless of the environment they're in. So thank you. So in terms of what are you most excited to see here in the future of education? So I asked, what are you most excited to see and what is the biggest barrier to success and quite frankly, course correcting a system, the entire system that has resulted in 50% of kids in our schools can't read, 60% can't do math on grade level. What are you excited about and what are the barriers that we need to be prepared to knock down?
So I participated in a lot of K-12 stuff, and at the same time, one thing leads to another, and we have kind of these systems interacting, and the other system is higher ed. And I think what I'm most excited to see is something like the classic learning test become adopted, become an avenue for people who are classically educated to receive things like funding for tuition. And these things terrify the people who are entrenched in their ways of controlling higher education, thought, and all these things, because it's a very different way of thinking, and it's gaining a lot of traction and popularity. And we've seen places adopt these policies, and that is very exciting. So I think Valor's biggest limit to expansion is the ability to hire teachers, by far. If you gave me $100 million that said, go open 20 Valors, I couldn't do it. Sorry. We don't have the people who are classically educated in the pipeline for coming from higher ed in order to hire them. It would be very difficult. So that is the limiting factor for growth. So I think we've seen tremendous growth, and we've realized we've really tapped out a lot of these universities that have students that are interested in teaching classical education. And there's a handful of universities that are kind of the pipeline for turning out very interested teachers. And I think what I'm most excited about is the connection from K-12 to higher ed and kind of bridging the gap with some of these institutions and models of teaching and thought and curriculum. And that's what I would say I'm most excited about. It's also a very different challenge. So at the age of 26, I was able to use a modest amount of money to recruit people to submit a charter application. From that has, in 8 years, we have 3,000 students and 5 school sites and $30 million, $40 million budgets. And all of that started from a very, very small initiative. When you look at higher ed, you look at $30-40 billion endowments and stuff like that, you can't overturn a school or something like that. You couldn't organically pop up a new institution in the way that you've been able to do this with K-12 education. And I don't know what it looks like, but I think Austin is some ways becoming like a new Rome in a certain sense. We see all these new institutions of thought and higher learning popping up here organically.
Yeah, University of Austin is a new model that is, fingers crossed, going to be able to bring back this love of teaching that will facilitate wonder from kids. So I'm with you.
Yep, a lot of little projects. There's the Civitas,
Yes.
and
Institute.
so
Yes.
I'm really excited. And these are just, I mean, when you think about higher ed, how big it is and how many places there are, we're only talking about a few institutes, and we are so excited that we finally got that. I think more of that is what I'm really excited to see, and those institutions turning out teachers, and then the thought can expand.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm with you on that. I agree. And we are working, I'll say for our viewers, we're working with several of these institutions of higher learning and universities to do a symposium in the fall and to make sure that we really are connecting those dots with the K through 12 classical model and the colleges of education or just the universities that are really focused on creating a great teacher pipeline so that teachers who do want to participate in this form of education that they are prepared to do so. Well, this has been phenomenal with hearing kind of specifically the Valor model and explaining really what a classical education can look like and quite frankly, how we can meet the demand and need to meet the demand with preparing our teachers. I would love for you before we wrap up to look in that camera right there, talk to the parents and the teachers of Texas about how they can get involved or seek out a classical model or just be an advocate for bringing some of the policies and the strategies that you have been a part of with founding Valor into their child's life or their school.
I would just say love your kids, pay attention. All that time spent paying attention to giving them the best will be worth it. On your deathbed, you will have no regrets whatsoever with the amount of time that you spent focusing on your children and giving them the best and really looking around and searching. And please take the time to do that, and they will be better for it. You will be better for it. And go after happiness.
Thank you, Becca, for joining us. Thank you all for joining us today. This is Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin, and now you have the power.